Welcome to my presentation on the representation of Muslims in the US media after 9/11. Today I'll critically analyze the documentary From Fear to Freedom, A Uyghur's Journey, which chronicles the experiences of Qasim Kashgar, a Uyghur exile who fled persecution in China to the US. This documentary not only highlights the distinct struggles of the Uyghur community in the US and also abroad, but also serves as a lens through which we can examine broader themes of identity, belonging, and advocacy within the American socio-political context. I have a lot of personal ties to the region of Xinjiang and the Uyghur individuals that live there, and because of this, I've been very invested in the ability for Uyghur advocates to advocate about these issues that they care about in the US and abroad. I'll employ Evelyn Assoltini's framework from her influential work. Assoltini's insights into how media portrayals can simultaneously humanize and stereotype Muslims are crucial for understanding the nuances of Kashgar's narrative. Furthermore, as we delve into the current geopolitical tensions between the US and China, we will explore how these dynamics impact the representation of Uyghurs and a broader narrative surrounding Muslims in American media. Let's delve into the analysis. From Fear to Freedom tells the compelling story of Qasim Kashgar, who fled Urumqi in China's Xinjiang region due to the oppressive surveillance and brutal oppression faced by the Uyghur people. The documentary opens with Kashgar recounting his childhood memories of the vibrant Uyghur culture. He states, "Growing up, I felt a deep connection to my roots. Being Uyghur was part of my identity, but this identity became a target." This stark reality drives him to escape to the United States, where he hopes to find safety and a platform for advocacy. Once in the US, the documentary shifts focus to Kashgar's new life, where he grapples with both the freedom to express himself and the challenges of being an immigrant advocate. He emphasizes, "In the United States, I found freedom, but I also found the weight of being an outsider. People often don't understand my struggle, and sometimes I feel invisible." Despite these challenges, Kashgar became a very fervent advocate for Uyghur rights, using his voice to raise awareness about the atrocities committed against his people. The documentary highlights his efforts to engage with various human rights organizations and his participation in public demonstrations in the US and abroad. For instance, he asserts, "I must speak out for those who cannot. My voice is my weapon in this fight for injustice." This advocacy not only seeks to inform the American public, but also to create a global dialogue on the human rights crisis in Xinjiang. The documentary serves to humanize a group that is often marginalized in discussions surrounding global terrorism and human rights, illustrating how Kashgar's narrative is emblematic of a broader issue facing Muslims in the United States. To analyze the documentary through Assoltini's framework, we must first consider the good Muslim, bad Muslim binary that has become prevalent in US media narratives since 9/11. Assoltini notes, "At such an opportune moment for further stereotyping, a moment of mourning, fear, trauma, anger, and presumably justifiable racism against the entire Arab and Muslim population, this wave of sympathetic representations seemed both unprecedented and unlikely." In From Fear to Freedom, Kashgar exemplifies the good Muslim archetype, an innocent victim of state oppression who embodies resilience, strength, and a commitment to justice. His portrayal challenges the dominant narrative that equates Muslims with extremism. Assoltini further observes, "Demonizing the enemy is so common during times of war. By focusing on Kashgar's humanity and the injustices faced by Uyghurs, the documentary seeks to dismantle these reductive stereotypes." As we consider the contemporary US-China tensions, particularly concerning human rights abuses in Xinjiang, it becomes evident that the representation of Uyghurs in American media is deeply intertwined with geopolitical narratives as it was back when 9/11 occurred. The US government's response to China's treatment of Uyghurs has involved both condemnation and strategic positioning, as the US seeks to portray itself as a defender of human rights. This dynamic echoes Assoltini's insights on how media portrayals can serve political agendas, as seen when she states, "Sympathetic representations, whether Bush's speeches, TV dramas, news reports, or public service announcements, were cited as examples of a new era of multicultural sensitivity." Here, the representation of Uyghurs as victims in the US media serves a dual purpose. One, advocating for human rights, while also reinforcing US narratives of moral supremacy and superiority over China. Additionally, the documentary employs humanitarian frames to evoke empathy and compassion from its audience. These frames often depict individuals like Kashgar as symbols of suffering that demand humanitarian intervention or support. This approach can be seen in Kashgar's journey, as the documentary highlights his struggles, not just to elicit sympathy, but to encourage active engagement and advocacy. While humanitarian frames can be powerful in raising awareness, they also risk reducing complex political issues to mere narratives of victimhood, potentially oversimplifying the broader socio-political context surrounding the Uyghur crisis. Furthermore, the framing of Uyghurs in the context of the US-China rivalry raises critical questions about authenticity and agency. While the US seeks to elevate Uyghur voices, one must consider whether these representations genuinely empower the Uyghur community or merely exploit their plight for geopolitical leverage. A Sultanese framework invites us to critically assess whether the US media's sympathetic portrayals are sincere attempts at fostering multicultural understanding or strategic maneuvers that ultimately serve the interests of US foreign policy over the actual empowerment of Muslim communities. In critically analyzing the documentary in conjunction to a Sultanese work, it is essential to identify the underlying stereotypes and recurring patterns of representation concerning Muslims in the United States. While the documentary provides a sympathetic portrayal of Kashgar, it risks reinforcing the narrative that Muslims are primarily defined by their victimhood or need for rescue. This portrayal, while necessary for understanding the Uyghur plight, can inadvertently contribute to the monolithic view of Muslims, framing them solely through the lens of oppression. This framework becomes particularly salient when examining the US-China relationship. As tensions rise, the US narrative often positions itself as a champion of human rights while simultaneously engaging in strategic competition with China. This duality can lead to a superficial understanding of Uyghur issues. By elevating Kashgar's story, the documentary aligns with the US narrative that seeks to spotlight human rights abuses while potentially oversimplifying the complexities of Uyghur identity and resistance against oppression. Moreover, the focus on Kashgar's journey in the US can be interpreted as aligning with a Sultan's notion of diversity patriotism, which is often seen in US media on Muslims. This concept refers to narratives that present Muslims in ways that align with American values of freedom and democracy and multiculturalism. The documentary showcases Kashgar's successful integration into American life, emphasizing his contributions as an advocate. The portrayal of Kashgar as a good Muslim, a victim of state oppression who embodies resilience, reflects a common stereotype that positions Muslims primarily as victims or threats, rather than multifaceted individuals with agency and diverse experiences. Situating Kashgar's story within post-9/11 discourses reveals how media representations fluctuate between vilification and potentially paternalistic sympathy. After the attacks, Muslims in the US were often framed as potential threats, fueling Islamophobia and justifying discriminatory policies. Since then, there have been polar opposite sympathetic portrayals like that of Kashgar's, yet they risk oversimplifying complex geopolitical realities. This duality highlights the need for more nuanced representations that acknowledge the complexities of identity and belonging rather than reducing Muslims to narratives that serve political agendas. This documentary, produced by the Voice of America, seeks to highlight the experiences of Uyghur Muslims in the US and beyond by sharing Kashgar's personal journey. The documentary seeks to foster empathy and seeks to humanize individuals like Kashgar who are often ignored by traditional media. This representation challenges prevailing stereotypes, inviting the audience, particularly non-Muslim Americans, to reconsider their perceptions of Muslims. The documentary's emphasis on Kashgar's declaration, "We must not let our fear define us, we must fight for our rights," resonates with many non-Uyghur Muslims as well who face different types of discrimination. This also reinforces a narrative of empowerment and activism. However, the cultural and social consequences of this type of representation is also significant. While the documentary aims to humanize the Uyghur struggle, it also raises questions about whether it is inadvertently upholding the good Muslim archetype, suggesting that empathy is reserved only for those who conform to certain types of narratives. This could risk reinforcing existing binaries of victimhood and heroism within the Muslim community. Moreover, the documentary may overlook the broader geopolitical context of US-China relations, which shapes perceptions of Uyghurs in America and also in the media broadly. By focusing predominantly on Kashgar's individual journey, it also risks highlighting the collective struggles of Uyghur communities and their acts of resistance on a different level. In conclusion, the documentary From Fear to Freedom serves as a vital documentary that sheds light onto the struggles of the Uyghur community in the United States and abroad, while engaging with the broader themes of representation and identity in the US context specifically. Through the lens of Evelyn Osultany's theoretical framework, we can see how the documentary both reflects and complicates existing narratives about Muslims in America. While the film offers sympathetic portrayals that evoke empathy, we must remain critical of the ways in which these representations fit into larger ideological and political constructs that may perpetuate stereotypes rather than dismantling them. The interplay between US-China relations and how Uyghurs are represented in the media illustrates the complexity of advocacy in a geopolitical context. As viewers, it is our responsibility to engage with these narratives thoughtfully, recognizing the complexities of identity and ongoing struggles for justice and representation for Muslims in the US. This is an incredibly urgent issue and also a deeply personal issue to myself, and I believe that understanding the Uyghur identity on its most nuanced and authentic level is critical for us to advocate for their rights going forward from the US and also beyond. Thank you.